and welcome to another Lost Ladies of Garden Writing. Today we're going to talk about the author Jean Hersey. And Jean is somebody, I should show you this other book first. So I was posting on my blog about finding and reading books that followed the calendar year. So my intention was that I would pick 12 and then just read them. And so when I say they follow the calendar year, it's like they have a chapter for January, a chapter for February, March. Many of these are nature related. And so when I posted about this on my blog, one of my readers, somebody named Susan M., she says I should read The Shape of Year, right there, Shape of Year. Let me turn that, by Jean Hersey. And so I thought, yes, I should. And so I looked up the book and I found a good used copy. And I also, by the way, on this one, the library still has it in stock. So I was able to check it out from the library and decided that I really did want it. So anyway, I found that good used copy. And it is a lovely book. And she goes from January on in every month. She's got some reminiscence about their garden. And this one, she is living in Connecticut when she wrote this book. And this book was written in, I should have this, 1967. So I decided to find out a little bit more about Jean because when I looked on the internet, I couldn't find anything. And so for starters, I did figure out based on my research, and I think I probably went through Google Books, she wrote I Like Gardening, which is this lovely book, 1941. Also A Garden in Your Window, 1949. Carefree Gardening, 1961. Wildflowers to Know and Grow, 1964. The Woman's Day Book of Houseplants, 1965. Cooking with Herbs, 1972. Flowering Shrubs and Small Trees, 169 Varieties for Your Garden in 1974. And the Woman's Day Book of Annuals and Perennials in 1977. And Gardening and Being, 1982, which I suspect that's a memoir. And I still may try to find that one. But anyway, she also wrote about a trip to Guatemala that she took called Halfway to Heaven, a Guatemalan Holiday, 1947. There's another month-by-month book called A Sense of Seasons from 1964. Another book called A Widow's Pilgrimage, 1979, which I believe was after her husband died. And then The Touch of the Earth, 1981. Woo! Plus, she and her husband, Robert, co-authored Change in the Wind in 1972, and then in 1979, I think this book came out after he died, These Rich Years, A Journal of Retirement. So anyway, Jean wrote a lot of books for the internet not to know much about her. So anyway, I put that blog post out there, and she is now a Lost Lady of Writing. And when I wrote about the Lost Lady of Writing information, the only book that I had was Shape of a Year. And she had a very brief biography on the back of that, basically that she was born and brought up in New York City and now lives in Weston, Connecticut. That's not much. So I did figure out online that she passed away in 1997. I could not find an obituary, at least in the digitized newspaper archives. But on ancestry.com, I was able to break through, and I came up with a few more records that told me the story. And so she was born Jean McKelvey in the Bronx, New York City, September 29th, 1902. She married Robert Hersey in 1925. They had 3 children, and that I based on the 1940 census records. They were in New York City. Her husband was an advertising manager. He made $5,000 a year, and she was listed as a writer, 1940, earning $1,200 a year. And they employed a cook who made $600 a year, a children's nurse who made $960 a year. And so I kind of did that in today's dollars, more or less. He made $107,000. She made $26,000. The cook made $13,000, and the nurse made $21,000. So anyway, she most likely, in 1940, was writing magazine articles, but I just couldn't find much about her. Other than I found reference, there's a book called The Once and Future Gardener, which is magazine articles written in the 30s and 40s, and it was put out by Virginia Tuttle Clayton in 2000. I have a copy of that. And Clayton noted that Jean was a prolific writer. I read all those books for you, or those titles, and at one time made her home in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. And it said that in 1962, she was honored with the ASTA Award for Best Garden Writing of the Year. And a reader of that blog post said they thought ASTA stood for American Seed Trade Association. So I could never confirm the part about her living in Pennsylvania, but I have no reason not to think that that's true. Many gardeners do end up in that area of the country. I checked a couple of other books, but nobody mentioned anything about Jean Hersey, and a couple of other books I have about old garden writers. Anyway, she was in North Carolina when she passed away. How she ended up there, I have no guess. Could be that one of her children lived there. So I did finally, as I mentioned, I got a copy of her first gardening book, I Like Gardening by Jean Hersey. And lo and behold, on the back, there is up to 1941, as complete a biography as you would like. I'm going to read it to you because I think it'll give you a flavor for how she wrote. And this is Jean Hersey says about herself. I am one of that rare species of New Yorkers who were not only born in the city, but still live there. I grew up in a section known as Spuyten Duyvil. I probably have mispronounced that. Maybe it's Spuyten Devil, which extends along a slight ridge beside the Hudson. In 1922, I graduated from the Brearley School, went to art school a short time, became very fond of skiing, and then married Robert Wilson Hersey in 1925. He also likes to ski. We began acquiring a family in due time and now have 3 children. Joan, who was 13 at the time, keeps us perpetually in a slightly celestial atmosphere by playing the harp. Bobby, age 9, builds anything from complicated boats to even more involved edifices with construction sets. Tim is 7. He likes to build too. And all 3 children keep Bob and me in trim when we ice skate, ski, or surfboard together. Sound like the very active young family. Continuing, about 8 years ago, we moved in from an apartment into a house and planted our first garden. Our new land was mostly sand and anthills and hadn't a tree to call its own. We were totally unfamiliar with the names of the seeds we planted, which made it all the more interesting when they came up. When our garden was still quite new, we were most delighted to find we had won a garden contest prize from the Herald Tribune. After our outdoors in New York was fairly well organized, we acquired a piece of land on Cape Cod right beside the ocean. Our neighbors assured us positively that nothing would grow there. This was a challenge. So just to be sure, we got a man with a truck and removed the poor soil from the dooryard garden and imported rich black sandy loam. This, having 2 gardens, is quite exciting, for it gives us an excuse to go up to Cape Cod early in May. The first thing I ever wrote was an article about the pool of our New York City garden. After seeing a color photograph of a blue water lily one day, I decided we would have to build a small water garden, though I hadn't a notion how to go about it. Bob said it sounded expensive. I assured him in a moment of optimism, for I had never written anything except letters to friends before, that I would do an article about it when it was complete and thus pay the cost. As a matter of fact, I did write the story of just what we did, and to my amazement, sold it to Better Homes and Gardens. We have found gardening so exciting and so full of endless pleasure that I wanted to tell people about it. In the past 8 years, I have written for Life, This Week, House and Garden, Better Homes and Gardens, American Homes, House Beautiful, Flower Grower, Delineator, and Spur. And I will tell you, this is not a thin volume. I Like Gardening. And all those other gardening books I read, I am slightly impressed about how much Jean picked up about gardening and was able to write about it, before the internet. I'm assuming that she just had loads of gardening books, probably from other lost ladies who garden writing. But anyway, this book, I Like Gardening, and I actually, by the way, I have a signed copy, and I will show that. It is signed by Jean Hersey, so I know she's actually held this book in her hand ever so briefly. It says to Helen, who knows where this gardening business may lead you? Watch out. affectionately, Jean Hersey, March 19th, 1941. True that. Watch out. You just never know when the gardening bug bites you. So she covers in this book, which she dedicated to her husband, she covers quite a bit. There are, and the chapters are in Roman numerals, so there are 23 chapters. Everything from gardening for fun to the last chapter is goodbye and good luck. So I thought I would turn to the herb chapter because I'm working on something with herbs. And she says, sometimes when your pool is built and planted, your flower garden and vegetables all neat and trim, and when rows of shiny tools decorate your work corner, you will feel experimental. Perhaps you will want to try herbs, and why not? And so that's her introduction to herbs. And I do like her last chapter in this book, which is called Goodbye and Good Luck. And it's just, I guess everything else that she wanted to say before she finished up this book. And that's what she did. So anyway, that hope that gave you a flavor for Jean Hersey, a lost lady of garden writing. I will read the last paragraph. There are so many gardening adventures ahead for anyone who has the urge to plan and plant. Far too many to describe in one short book. This book is over 200 pages. Your enthusiasm will lead you to discover many for yourself. We are all alike in this, that last year's garden, satisfying as it was, perhaps even beautiful and much admired, pales in comparison with the gardens we are going to have. You never reach your ideal. That is part of the fun. But one thing you will feel confident, next year's garden will be the most wonderful of all. And that is Jean Hersey. I Like Gardening. And also Jean Hersey, The Shape of the Year, and several other books. I hope you've enjoyed this Lost Lady of Garden Writing. She is one of my favorites. She is one of my first. And so if you are listening to this as a podcast, you can tell your friends and subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. And you can like and subscribe below. And I'll put some links for some additional information. Thank you.